warm welcome along to this week's Assist, sponsored by Free Super Tips. I'm Warren Ashurst, and once again I've been joined by Mark Langdon and Dan Childs to take us through their expert tips and advice in terms of the weekend Premier League and EFL action. I think it's fair to say it's been a testing week for everybody at Old Trafford, with Manchester United still with Erik ten Hag in charge. Whether you're of a certain persuasion, you might feel that that is a little bit of a surprising news, but things don't get any easier for them this weekend as United make the trip to Aston Villa, and that is our big match focus on the Assist this week. It's a Sunday 2:00 kickoff at Villa Park, and Villa, of course, fresh from that Champions League success over Bayern Munich in midweek. It's arguably, Mark, one of the worst potential fixtures for Manchester United, bearing in mind what's gone on over the last couple of weeks.
There are no easy games, are there, for Manchester United at the moment, that's for sure. But, you know, they, I suppose, go to a club that is on the up, full of confidence after beating Bayern Munich, as you mentioned just there. A team that's well coached under Unai Emery that I think, you know, could he be the Manchester United manager? You know, imagine swapping the two guys over. Ten Hag was Aston Villa manager and Unai Emery was the Manchester United manager. Like, where would the two clubs be? I think it's probably fair to say that United would be in a better position given their resources. You know, for Ten Hag, I felt like this season there had been not necessarily signs of progress tactically, but they had brought in even more players. The defence has got better names there. The injured players are back. Like, there are no excuses now, really, for this team. And what they served up against Tottenham last week was an absolute shambles of a first half. I know Bruno Fernandes was harshly red carded, and maybe the second half would have been different. You know, you just don't know. But what we do know is that first 45 minutes was an absolute joke. Tottenham, you know, should have been probably 3-up at that point. And you know, United 3 years into Ten Hag's tenure, still the same question marks as to kind of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to be. And if Aston Villa, you know, are at it and play to the levels that they can, it's going to be a very difficult afternoon, I would have thought, for United.
We were recording this, Dan, prior to Thursday's Europa League clash against Porto. But we're led to believe that Erik ten Hag has probably got 2 games to save his job now. The game with Porto and then this Aston Villa clash at the weekend. I mean, if there wasn't enough pressure on him already, then that's certainly ramped it up.
Yeah, but I suppose Erik ten Hag could, you know, say that 2 games to save my job is a better position than I've been in before, because you got the FA Cup final last season. That was 1 game to save his job against Manchester City, and you know, they pulled out a performance. But I mean, clearly this I can't see him staying in the job, you know, certainly long term. Whether he'll last beyond the international break, who knows? It might not just depend on United's results, but how United's recruitment's going, who they think they can get in, whether they will be happy with like an interim period, maybe under Ruud van Nistelrooy for a while. So that's going to, you know, come into play as well. But right now, they look in a real state. I mean, it's difficult at the moment to assess, you know, ahead of the weekend. You know, they could go and get a result against Porto, play a lot better, and go into the Villa game with more confidence. You don't really know with United, you know, what you're going to get, you know, when they turn up, and that is, you know, one of the big issues for them.
Warren, I think one of the sort of issues for Ten Hag is that now this is completely his team, isn't it? You know, he's been able to invest, and the board, rightly or wrongly, have kind of backed his judgment on a lot of the players, a lot of them that he's managed before. And like, I don't think any of them are getting any better. That's like the biggest concern. I mean, Ugarte's come in from PSG. It's early days, but he just looks like so slow, really, and immobile. Delit. Jamie Carragher kind of tore him apart, didn't he, on Monday Night Football, sort of always in the wrong position. Mazraoui was just fortunate that it was Timo Werner on that left wing and not Heung-min Son, because I think Son would have put those chances away. But Son Werner just ran past him a couple of times. So there are no excuses left for Erik ten Hag. You know, there's only Luke Shaw that's injured at the moment. most managers would love to have Bruno Fernandes and Kobe Mainu, in their team. I mean, who has he improved since he's been there? You could argue maybe Garnacho, although organically he might have just got better anyway.
Well, even he's not been playing all the time, has he? And it's kind of been that chop and change. And I just wonder down a little bit whether, Arne Slot at Liverpool is probably a prime example of somebody who's come in and stuck generally with a starting 11, whereas Erik ten Hag continually tends to rotate, despite players being in a good vein of form, but then maybe drop the next week. That doesn't seem to be helping his cause at all.
I think part of it's rotation and part of it is just almost a desperate search for some kind of better formula as well. That's often the case when a manager keeps changing the team. But as Mark said, one of the big issues is, over 2 and a bit years, the lack of improvement in individuals. And bearing in mind, United seem to be going down a road now of getting young players with potential. They're going to need a manager that's going to bring them on. I mean, you look at the likes of Højlund and Xerxes that have come in there. They're not really ready-made players at the moment. They're players that we've scoped to do better and improve and perhaps be top Premier League forwards, but they're not there right now. And Marcus Rashford, who was looking decent a couple of years ago, he had one good season, then a bad one. He just looks as unreliable as ever at the moment. So big concerns for him. It's such a key area of the pitch, up front where games are won and lost.
In stark contrast, Mark, Aston Villa absolutely flying at the moment. I mean, I think it's fair to say, and I only caught the highlights on Wednesday, that it was, you could argue that it was a deserved victory against Bayern Munich. And then, off the back of a 2-2 draw with Ipswich, when people might have been thinking, things starting to slip a little bit, they come up with a performance like that.
Really good game, Warren. It was, despite the fact that it was 0-0 for a long time. It's one of those intriguing games that I'm not being ironic, but by saying it was intriguing because Villa were very comfortable in letting Bayern have the ball up to a certain point, and so Bayern dominated possession. They, that had some shots and some chances, and they will do. You look at the quality they've got up front. You're not going to keep them quiet for 90 minutes, but there was an acceptance, I think, from Villa that they were comfortable in their shape, and then they just sprung counter-attacks. And in the first half, Ollie Watkins got Upamecano booked. He was an ever-willing runner, and the tactics were working. It was hard work at times for Villa. And then, after Watkins has given Upamecano a kind of going over for an hour, then they bring on Duran, who, we talk about Man United sort of goal-scoring problems. I mean, Villa have got two absolutely, top-level strikers now, haven't they? Because Watkins, has come on a lot in the last couple of years, and I think that's what good coaching does for you. And then Duran, in this sort of super sub role, is almost unstoppable, isn't he? And another goal to ease tally. I think from Villa's point of view, like beating Bayern Munich, the belief and confidence that gives you, it will be immense, actually, because they've been out of, although they're in sort of the sort of Europe's top competition, they've kind of been on the kind of outside, haven't they? Kind of the elite for a while, and they managed to force their way into the top four last season, and then beating Bayern Munich. And let's not forget, this is a Bayern Munich team stacked with talent that beat Arsenal last season, was on the verge of reaching the Champions League final. So that feel good factor is really there at Villa at the moment. There were a lot of good performances, but I think it was more the collective, and that's in stark contrast to United. Like Unai Emery has got not one way of playing, because he can do it many different ways, but the players absolutely buy into it, and you see that with someone like Morgan Rogers, really coming, and another one that just improves, and that's what Dan was talking about earlier about on the other side of United, the players not improving, whereas you've seen at Villa those players with kind of the raw talent just stepping up. Conser would be another one. So, absolutely outstanding. And so in terms of this game, I'm going for a Villa win. I'm going to go for Aston Villa to win and over 2.5 goals. I mean, Villa have scored 12 Premier League goals already this season. Arsenal are the only team that have limited them to sort of under 2 goals in a Premier League game. But they haven't actually kept a Premier League clean sheet. So that might be the hope for Manchester United.
That's a brilliant picture as well, by the way, earlier today. 5 years ago, Steve Bruce was getting hit by a wet lettuce by Aston Villa fans. when they were in the Championship, and then 5 years later on, they're beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League. Run you through the prices, by the way. Villa 13-10 to win the game on Sunday. The draw 27-10, and Manchester United 19-10. We just touched upon Unai Emery there, Dan. We can't overplay what a brilliant job he's done at Villa Park.
Yeah, done an absolutely fantastic job. You think when he came in, it was about 2 years ago, pretty much, exactly 2 years ago, they were in a relegation battle, weren't they? There was, a fair bit of the season had gone, and there was big danger there. Finished that season, I think, qualifying for Europe, and have just gone on and on. It's an amazing job that he's done there. The recruitment, I would say, has been good as well.
Yeah.
Give that a shout out as well. They've been done very well with their buying of players. But for this game, I mean, that price you just mentioned there, 13-10, I would just take that price, Villa to win. What I would say, I wouldn't be going absolutely hammering that price and getting really stuck in. There's just a couple of concerns on the injury front with Villa coming out of that game. Bailey, Anana, Ramsey, picking up. It looked like picked up injuries. John McGinn's still out for them as well. So the squad is getting a little bit thinner than ideally you'd like. There's good players to come in. Ross Barkley, I think's a class act. Probably come in and start. Maybe they'll play. With the issues up front, maybe they'll give Duran and Watkins, a game together. Try and pair them together up there. Who knows? But I do think, just mentioning those two players, that's the difference for me. Well, there's probably a few differences between the teams, but the big difference is Watkins and Duran up front. Either of those will walk into United's side, and I think they'll be the key to winning the game. Villa home win for me.
Okay, well, just to remind you, Aston Villa against Manchester United, a 2:00 kickoff on Sunday. Let's take a look at the rest of the Premier League action now, starting with Saturday's early kickoff at a 12:30 start at Selhurst Park for Crystal Palace against Liverpool. Palace 5-1 to pick up the victory. Liverpool 2-1 on, and the draw 7-2. We've been, I suppose I was going to say, you've been critical, I would say, Mark, of Crystal Palace of late. I watched them against Everton last week. I thought they were really good in the first half, and they took that 1-goal lead at Goodison. But then a completely different side in the second half. And I know there's a former colleague of ours who hates that word momentum, but that's been used by Oliver Glasner this week. He feels like they need to get some sort of momentum going, and they can't at this stage.
Yeah, so that former colleague Bruce Millington, the ex-presenter of the show, he actually texted me on Saturday night, sort of suggesting Palace might be a bet for relegation, or certainly in comparison to the price that Everton are for the drop. And I don't think Palace will be relegated, but I didn't understand the hype at the start of the season around them. I think it's caused problems for Glasner, really, because there were expectations that maybe they could, Palace could finish in the top half and maybe even kick on a bit more than that. But the loss of Elise, when you lose a player to Bayern Munich, and I'm speaking from experience here as a Spurs fan, when you lose a player to Bayern Munich, there's a reason why they're somebody so elite, and it's because they're a top player. So always going to struggle to replace him. I also, I personally didn't understand selling Anderson. There might have been some sort of financial kind of benefits to getting rid of, an older player and bringing in younger ones. But him and Gay just had a really good partnership going. So you're breaking up the centre-back partnership. You're losing one of your two most creative sparks. I mean, you could argue about him and Eze, Elise and Eze. But they're very important players, very important parts of the team. For this game, I'm going for Liverpool to win and under 3.5 goals. All of Liverpool's league wins this season have been achieved with under 3.5 goals. They are just being quite patient under Arne Slot, and the current table toppers, I think, can maintain their position at the summit.
Yeah, Liverpool top of the table, Dan, at the moment. Wouldn't necessarily say at their best against Bologna in the Champions League, but got the job done again. And as we mentioned earlier on, it's that kind of churning out results for the moment at Liverpool.
They are churning out results. I would. I mean, this Mark's mentioned before. I would just, remind that their start of the season, their schedule has been, a lot softer than certainly many of the other top clubs. So there's got to be a little bit of a wait and see, I think, on how they're going to fare when the fixtures get tougher. I mean, this is a fixture they'll expect to win. I'm not sure those prices I would actually take a chance and be a layer. I would go Palace or draw double chance. A couple of the games at Palace have picked up results in. They've kind of had defended deep, and maybe it suited them a little bit more to play on the break. Got a draw against United where they were poor first half, played better in the second half. Got a draw away to Chelsea. So I can see it being a similar type of game. Palace sitting and looking to hit on the break. Eze has had the third highest amount of shots in the league, so he's a big threat. I think Ismaila Sarr is a threat. I mean, when they're going to get round to starting him, I don't know. He made a huge difference when he came on in the Manchester United game. I thought it gave him a much more potency. I just think I watched Liverpool at Wolves, and against the Wolves side that are struggling, they didn't blow me away really with their performance. It was, quite a tight game, and so I'm not comfortable, with the price that they're at. So Palace will draw a double chance for me.
Okay, well, there are 5 3:00 games in the Premier League on Saturday, and we'll start off with a clash at the Emirates as Arsenal take on Southampton. Arsenal 8-1 on to pick up the victory. It's 8-1 the draw, 18-1 Southampton to claim a shock victory. I mean, if there's any positives to take from Southampton ahead of this trip, Dan, it's potentially what happened with Leicester last week, fighting back from 2-0 down, but eventually losing. What did you make of that display from Arsenal?
I just think that maybe they've just lost a little bit of concentration in the game. They've got, as they've shown on many occasions this season, a fantastic defence. I watched, the game against Spurs defended superbly. The game against Manchester City, although they conceded twice, to be down to 10 men against such a good side for long periods, defended really well. This game, I don't think they're going to be having to do a lot of it defending, but I think the Leicester game will be a handy kind of reminder just to stay switched on at the back. And so I think this time they'll keep a clean sheet. I'm going to go with Arsenal win to 0 at shade of odds on. Looks a good solid bet to me. Southampton, I not only see them finishing in the bottom 3, it wouldn't surprise me if they finished bottom of the pile. I thought they were really poor again against Bournemouth, sort of started the game quite brightly and then conceded and were blown away for the rest of the first half. Made Bournemouth look like a very, very good side. I think they've got big problems, Southampton, again, in both boxes. They don't seem to carry much of a threat up front, and they look, wide open at the back. So, comfortable Arsenal win for me.
Yeah, Russell Martin was pretty critical, Mark, of that performance against Bournemouth on Monday. Did he have every right to be?
Yeah, I think so. They, as Dan said, started well, but once the first goal went in, they seemed to down tools for the rest of the first half. And, you can't be doing that really in any Premier League game. Southampton are not good enough, to do that. I agree with Dan here in terms of the best bet. I'm going to go for Arsenal to win to 0. We haven't spoken about the fact that, Arsenal eased past Paris Saint-Germain 2-0 at the Emirates on Tuesday. Minimum of fuss. Back to a clean sheet, PSG at the post, and then maybe have 1 or 2 moments. But for the vast majority of that game, Arsenal were really comfortable, against a decent European side, one that's not as strong now. Mbappe's not there, but still, it still needs some beating. So, they kind of went back to their roots, really, making sure they kept a clean sheet. And I expect them to do the same here. So, yeah, Arsenal to win now.
Brentford face Wolves in another of the 3:00 kickoffs. Brentford, the home side, are evens to claim the victory. It's 13-5 the draw and 13-5 Wolves in this one. Mark, we'll start with you. I suppose we're expecting early fireworks when Brentford play at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious bet is Brentford to score in the first minute, or was it 3 in a row? And Waymo, big threat for Brentford. I'm going to actually go for both teams to score in this game. No clean sheet for either side in the league this season, and I don't know. I feel a bit sorry for Wolves. I don't think they're quite as bad as the league table suggests at the moment, but confidence is low, and that's always a problem when until you start getting points and wins on the ball. But but both teams to score for me.
Yeah, Mark mentioned their confidence in the Wolves camp, Dan. And you said earlier on in the game against Liverpool, they actually weren't that bad. But it just felt like when Liverpool dropped off, Wolves didn't necessarily have that confidence to sort of take advantage.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue, I think, at the top end of the pitch. I think Cunha is the one that has got some quality. And, maybe if he gets on a run of goals, he could, help fire them out of trouble. I just think these are two teams, actually, that if maybe one of the newly promoted teams, does as a decent season, I'm thinking maybe an Ipswich, that these are two of the teams that I would say they would be targeting that maybe, could get dragged into a relegation battle. I know Brentford have, got a few more points on the board at the moment, but I'm not totally convinced by them. Had that great start against Spurs and they got blown away. Had that great start against West Ham, and although they got a draw in the end, West Ham have been struggling and they've gone on to dominate that game, won the shot count 19-8, and that makes me question Brentford a bit. I think they've got similar issues to Wolves, that a lack of real top quality up front now with, losing Ivan Toney. And I don't see a big difference between the teams. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the draw. I think it's overpriced.
Okay, well, we'll turn our attentions to the next of the 3 o'clock games now, and that is at the King Power Stadium where Leicester take on Bournemouth. Dan, we'll start with you on this one. Leicester obviously will take a bit of credit and a little bit of confidence from that fight back, temporary as it was against Arsenal last week. Bit more pressure on them at home, though, you'd suggest, to take the points here.
I think so, yeah. I mean, none of the newly promoted teams have won a game yet this season. Leicester are going to be looking at this, not an easy game by any means, but they will be thinking, we've got to try and target and, get these wins, from somewhere. I don't really see them getting it here. I think Bournemouth are a better side. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know how much you can go by the game against Southampton, because Southampton was so poor for that sort of 20, 25-minute first half spell. But Bournemouth did look good, played some good football. And I don't think I'll be looking to back them at, a shade of odds against to win the game here, because Leicester away, it's not an easy fixture. But Evan Nilsson really caught my eye in the game against Southampton. Brilliant bit of movement and finish for his goal. Came in for a lot of money. I could see that kind of quality there in the movement and the finish. So I'm going to back him to get another one here. Evan Nilsson to score anytime.
Tricky one for Leicester here, Mark, because Bournemouth are the type of team that will pretty much go anywhere. We saw at Anfield the other week and they'll attack.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going to go over 2.5 goals, because both teams have scored in every Leicester game so far this season. And I had sort of reservations really about Leicester's attack coming into the campaign, but they scored at Arsenal, they scored against Villa, they've scored against Tottenham. It's not been the easiest run of games for them, and they're finding ways to score. And Bournemouth looked so slick against Southampton in that first half. And as you say, Warren, they will just play on the front foot because it's the only way they know how to play. So, I think this might be a very entertaining game.
Well, the latest team to try and end Manchester City's almost invincible run at the Etihad is Fulham on Saturday. It's another 3 o'clock kickoff. City are 4-1 on to win the game. It's 6-1 the draw, 17-2 Fulham. Mark, we'll start with you, and let's start with Manchester City, because at the moment we're wondering maybe what you're going to get from them more than ever, bearing in mind with the injuries, of course. At Newcastle, you could argue that they possibly just about shaded it in the second half, but of course more dropped points and I suppose a bit more pressure in this game. Yeah,
well, I mean, they're no longer favourites, are they, for the Premier League title? Arsenal have gazumped them in that position. I didn't think they played well at Newcastle at all, really. Maybe shaded it, but definitely not by enough to say that it was sort of a typical City performance. I mean, they usually beat Fulham and beat them well. But I'm just going to, in a game where there's probably not much sort of great betting value, I'm just going to go for Fulham or draw, double chance. City are vulnerable from counters and set pieces without Rodri. And I thought Fulham have looked decent this season. I mean, this is obviously, a gigantic step up from what they've been playing. And, City should win, but I wouldn't back them at the prices. Without Rodri, the thing just doesn't seem to work as well, that sort of City machine.
No, definitely not. And Fulham, of course, looking for back-to-back away wins, Dan, after that success at Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get back-to-back away wins. I think that City, that the Champions League win will have done them a bit of good, actually, to go and win 4-0 away from home. A game you'd expect them to win comfortably, but they started it nice, on the front foot, 2 up inside the first 15 minutes, put on a good performance against Slovan Bratislava. And I just think that'll give them a nicer feeling going into the weekend. They've still got, sometimes you can focus on, obviously there's 2 fantastic players missing, but they've got a fantastic squad of players that really should be able to blow away most teams in the league. And I think they'll be quite a bit too strong for Fulham. Fulham have started the season very well. I would just caution the fact that they've not played any of the teams that finished in last season's top 6 yet. This is as tough as it gets for me away from home. I think City's price has drifted quite a bit, and that allows you to get Man City double result. So half-time, full-time, a shade of odds on. I think that's a reasonable bet.
Well, the fifth and final 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday is at the London Stadium. West Ham against Ipswich. I suggest, Dan, that we've talked about pressure a couple of times already. There's going to be immense pressure on Julian Lopetegui and his side to get a result here. Yeah,
it's a game where your human instinct, I could be wrong here, but your human instinct tells you to get against West Ham because of and initially I'm looking at this, I'm thinking that, you can imagine the crowd, they've lost 3 games at home. If they start slowly or fall behind, the crowd will be on their back. That is true. But there are a shade of odds on against the team. I expect them to finish quite a bit above in the league this season. So I've flipped completely, and I'm going to tip a West Ham win. I think they played quite a bit better actually at Brentford last week. Had the shocker, conceded the early goal, and won the shot count 19-8. Probably should have gone on and won the game really. Ipswich have started pretty well, got 4 draws apart from the 2 games against Liverpool and Manchester City. But I think most of their points are going to be picked up at Portman Road. I think away games against the team. This is against a team I still think will finish comfortably in the top half. So a tough game for Ipswich, West Ham to win.
West Ham are 4-5, by the way, to claim the victory. It's 16-5 Ipswich, 14-5 the draw. Liam Delap on the score sheet twice last week, Mark, and he's going to be significant, you feel, if Ipswich are going to have a chance of staying up.
Yeah, he's my tip for the first goal scorer in this game, Warren. I mean, 2 very good finishes, as you say, against Villa. He looks their main goal threat at the moment. I thought Ipswich, they were at home, and as Dan says, you're probably going to be stronger at Portman Road, but I thought they played very well against the Villa side that then goes out and beats Bayern Munich. Could argue maybe that Villa had one eye on that Champions League game. I think that would be harsh on Ipswich. I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham came back to win the game because I think they have got the quality, but I know a lot of West Ham fans, and I can sense the frustration that's going to be there and the nerves that's going to be there at kickoff. So don't be surprised if it's a bit edgy early on, and someone like Delap might just be able to take advantage.
Okay, let's turn our attentions now to the evening game on Saturday. A really intriguing encounter at Goodison Park at 5:30. Everton, fresh from their first win of the season at home to Newcastle. The Toffees 11-5, the draw 13-5. And Newcastle 23-20. People talk about the unexpected nature of football, Mark, and these are 2 teams that are pretty hard to predict at the moment, bearing in mind recent games.
I think Everton, their results have been hard to predict, but their performances have been fairly solid and consistent, I would say, apart from, they went down to 10 men early. Well, not early, but in that first game against Brighton, they went down to 10 men. So it started the season poorly, then got thumped at Tottenham. I think the rest of their performances have been at a level that says that they shouldn't be sort of fighting relegation this season. And I was quite surprised by kind of the dismissive quotes for Everton in this game. Newcastle were not amazing away from home by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm going to go for Everton or draw a double chance. If they play like they have been, I think this is quite a difficult game for Newcastle.
No, I would tend to agree. And I covered Everton against Palace last week. I thought Dwight McNeil was absolutely outstanding, not only with the 2 goals, but pretty much ran the show as well in the middle of the park. Dan, Newcastle responded in decent fashion, bearing in mind that first defeat of the season at Fulham against Manchester City. But we've already said before, haven't we, that they're a different team away from St James's Park than they are at home.
That is it. They are a lot stronger at home with that crowd behind them, and away from home, I know they won at Wolves, but I didn't really like most of that performance as well. I just the Bournemouth away performance wasn't great. Probably could have lost that game. I'm not convinced by them away from home, and I'm actually just going to go for Everton to win this game. I think it's overpriced. I think 11-5 to win the game. I think there's been a mood change since the takeover as well. Whether it's just a coincidence that they're getting a bit more luck now since the takeover's happened, because as Mark mentioned, they've been playing pretty well anyway. But the fact that the results are starting to turn now the takeover's happened, it just feeds into the atmosphere at Goodison. I think the crowd are going to be right behind them from the first whistle. Branthwaite came back last week as well. That was a massive boost for them defensively. So things starting to look up for Everton. And I think they could get the win here.
I think what they've decided is it's probably best to fall behind and then try and win the game rather than taking a lead, which seemed to work against Palace last week. We've already, of course, looked at Aston Villa against Manchester United on Sunday. The other 2:00 kickoff sees Chelsea against Nottingham Forest. We're recording this, of course, prior to Chelsea's Conference League clash on Thursday. The home side at 12-25 to claim the victory. Forest 11-2. The draw around 7-2. And down with Chelsea, I mean, where else can we go other than Cole Palmer and that brilliant display last week? Just how significant is he going to be to their chances this season?
Massive, and could well be the difference, with them, making the top four. I think, I'm looking at the league now, and you take the Liverpool, City, Arsenal. I know it's early in the season, but I'd say there's probably one spot there that a few of the clubs will be going for, and Chelsea, I think, will have every chance of getting it. Nicholas Jackson as well, not getting so many of the headlines, but he's had a good start to the season, 4 goals as well, and was actually ahead of Cole Palmer in the Chelsea scoring charts before last weekend. And that's where I'm going to go with this. On Cole Palmer is the favourite to score the first goal. Nicholas Jackson, a bigger price at 5-1. I think probably too big a price. I know his finishing can be a bit wayward at times, but he's had 18 shots, the same number of shots as Cole Palmer. Okay, he's probably less clinical than Cole Palmer, but I think at that price, he's well worth chancing. Forest had a good start to the season, but as a disappointing result for them at home to Fulham last weekend, I don't see them getting anything here at Stamford Bridge.
As somebody who's got Nicholas Jackson in his fantasy league team, I hope you're right, Dan, on that front. Forest, of course, have already won at Anfield, Mark, this season, and there's a case to be made that they are probably more suited to playing away from home with Nuno's style. This is going to be a bit more of a test for Chelsea.
I think it'll be a different test. Forest are not going to defend on the halfway line, are they? Like Brighton did last week. So you can rest. I don't know what's going to happen in the game, but that's an absolute banker that Forest will defend deeper than Brighton did. I've got the same bet actually though. Nicholas Jackson, first goal scorer. He leads the league in non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes this season, and even in XG, only Haaland is ahead of him. So Chelsea, with Palmer and all of the Madueke and all of the talent they've got behind him, are creating the chances for Jackson. He's not the most clinical, but that's more than reflected in the price.
And finally, last but not least, Sunday's 4:30 game is at the Amex Stadium where Brighton take on Tottenham. Mark, we've got to speak Tottenham first. A lot was said about Manchester United being poor last Sunday. Tottenham were very good in the performance at Old Trafford. And I think, maybe a couple of players who are not necessarily given the credit they deserve previously, for me, shone in that game. I thought Brennan Johnson and particularly James Maddison were excellent. Bearing in mind that there was no Son, like you mentioned earlier on, show that Tottenham can deal without him.
Yeah, I mean, Maddison's definitely played better this season than he kind of finished last season. I'm going to throw another one out there, though. I was when you were sort of going through that, I thought you was going to mention Kulusevski, who I couldn't believe didn't win Man of the Match from Gary Neville. Just got blinded by that one Van der Ven run. I think Kulusevski, you could argue at the moment you could argue he's the most creative player in the league. If you just wanted to be maybe more sensible, you'd say he's one of the most creative players in the league at the moment. Tottenham are second on expected goals, both in terms of goal difference and expected points this season, behind Liverpool. So you might remember a couple of weeks ago, Warren, I was always very calm about the way that Tottenham's season had started in terms of results. I always felt that the kind of, the wins would come if they carried on doing what they were doing. I think they're playing better now than they did last season when they were top of the table around about this stage. And I think they can beat Brighton. I'm sort of, as far as Brighton go, the way they defended against Chelsea last week, conceded 2 against Forest as well. I think Tottenham will really enjoy this game. And what we do know is you're going to get 22 players on the halfway line, aren't you? Both teams are going to defend really high. Should be a bit of a shootout. And I think that kind of basketball nature suits Tottenham rather than sort of anybody that sits in and tries to frustrate them.
There's got to be goals surely down in this game, bearing in mind the way the two teams play.
I think there'll be goals, but I think the final scoreline, I see it being quite close, which is why I'm going to go for. I think the draw looks quite a big price. I think it's got priced up quite big because of the expectation of a high scoring game. Often the draw gets priced up bigger then, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if a 2-2 or maybe even a 3-3. Spurs were very, very good at Manchester United. There's just a few issues in the squad that where I would worry if certain players get injured. Doggy, got injured. It's a big. Spence did all right when he come on actually, but it is a big drop off in that position. And I've got the game. We're talking before the game, the trip to Hungary against Ferencváros away. So you don't know what's going to come out of that as well. Brighton, I always think a team when they've had a 3 week to prepare, it is quite a big advantage over a side that's certainly the side that's going away in Europe and then having to play again less than 3 days later. So for that reason, I do like Spurs, who are very good at Manchester United, and without the midweek game, I may have been tempted to back them, but no, going to go for the draw.
Just to confirm the prices for you, Brighton 15-8, the draw 3-1, and Tottenham 6-5. That wraps up then our look at the Premier League action this weekend. Up next, it's the EFL. Well, our match in focus in the EFL this week comes in League One, where Mansfield take on Blackpool. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. Already, Dan, Steve Bruce, a few eyebrows were raised when he was appointed at Blackpool, but he's making some progress so far.
He's doing a fantastic job. I think they've got 13 points from 5 games. It's not down to luck as well that they are, the football. I mean, the impact of him has been incredible. Under Critchley, they were struggling. They weren't really being unlucky as well. They were losing games and weren't playing very well. But their metrics, thing that a lot of managers talk about now, shots on target, XG, have gone through the roof since Steve Bruce has gone there. And I think they'll go and win this game as well. Mansfield have got a brilliant start. They're up to 3rd in the league, newly promoted. Nigel Clough, though, after nearly every game, and he's very honest. He said quite regularly that how hard was that to win that game, and they're really going to the well, and fine margins have been in their favour. They got 2-0 win away to Crawley on Tuesday. That apparently was very hard fought as well. So I just wonder when Mansfield. I just think that they're running into probably the form team in the division now this weekend, and Blackpool for me they're the likelier winners. So I'll go with them on the draw no bet.
Okay, Mansfield 31-20, the draw 13-5, and Blackpool 31-20. Just a quick mention at the top of League One down at the moment, because you said there how well Mansfield have done. Wrexham, Mansfield and Stockport, all of those promoted last season, all in the top 6 at the minute. I think that probably shows you the strength in depth from League Two last time around.
It's partly that. I would also say that the fact that the teams that have come out have got such big budgets as well, and have been able to recruit and improve their squads again. Wrexham, big budget team, Stockport, big budget team as well. So I think I don't think it necessarily means there's a really tiny gap between League One and League Two. I just think that they've been able to, improve their squads and get better again.
Okay, well, that is the match in focus in the EFL. Mansfield against Blackpool on Saturday. We're going to turn our attentions now to Dan's EFL tips for the weekend. Dan always gives us 3 best bets, of course, across the Football League. And who are we going with this week, Dan?
I'm going to start off with a team that I tipped to get relegated at the start of the season, which is Plymouth. I'm going to back them on the draw no bet at home to Blackburn. You've got part of this job. You have to kind of admit when you've got things wrong. I think I've definitely got Plymouth wrong, and maybe Wayne Rooney wrong as well. He's doing an excellent job there. You could look at their points and you could say, they've got 8 points from 8 games, which isn't amazing. But when you look at, they've had a real tough start on the fixture list. The last 2 defeats away, they were both good, strong performances. They lost narrowly 1-0 at West Brom. Were well in that game. You look at the stats; it was quite even. Lost 1-0 at Burnley in midweek, and at home got a 3-2 win at home to Sunderland. I watched the game against Luton where they won 3-1. They were excellent in that game. Thoroughly deserved to win. Some excellent players for them. Ibrahim Sissoko, who they brought in, got 2 goals, brilliant, coming off the bench. Rami Al-Hajj, new signing, scored a superb first goal. Morgan Whittaker, I was surprised they kept in. There was interest from Burnley from him in the window, so they're doing really well. Blackburn had the 3-0 loss away to Coventry in the week, so on a downer for them. Plymouth to win this game. I'll go the second one, sticking with the same division. Stevenage draw no bet away to Peterborough, 11-8. I think that's a overpriced. Stevenage to a couple of brilliant 1-0 wins recently at home to Charlton and Wrexham, two teams that are going to be looking to push for promotion. And I think they're playing Peterborough at a good time. Peterborough, no win in 3, lost 3-0 away to Wigan on Tuesday. Got a few injuries piling up. Cipriano went off injured in the week. So Stevenage there on the draw no bet. And the last one going to drop into League 2, MK Dons, just to win the game at home to Tranmere at a shade of odds on. MK Dons are 14th, but they're only going one way under Scott Lindsay. They've got him from Crawley, the manager. I think he's one of the best managers in the lower leagues. Masterminded that astonishing playoff semi-final victory for Crawley over MK Dons last season, the 8-1 aggregate win. I think he's going to do a really good job at MK Dons. Big budget, talented squad. I think they can only go one way. And against Tranmere, who are the lowest scorers in the division, they're normally well organised, but it's a big pitch at MK. I think MK will be too much for them.
Okay, so Dan's 3 selections from the EFL this week. Plymouth draw no bet, Stevenage draw no bet, and an outright win for the MK Dons against Tranmere. Up next, it's Mark's turn. His best bets, including the Bet Builder. Well, Mark, we had success with the Bet Builder last week, an 8-1 winner in the Chelsea-Brighton game. Which match are we looking at this week?
I'm sticking with Brighton, Warren, primarily because I think if you are having a sort of positive Bet Builder bets, you need stuff to happen, and stuff happens in Brighton matches. So that's why we're going there. And it's 3 players to have over 1.5 shots in the game. So first of all, Ruta, the Brighton player they bought from Leeds, he's averaging over 5 shots per 90 minutes and has had 14 in his last 4 Premier League games. So definitely not afraid to have a dig. You mentioned him earlier on, Brennan Johnson. Confidence is flying at the moment. As we speak, and that's obviously before the trip to Hungary, he's had over 1.5 shots in 8 of his last 9 appearances. And he was a winner on the prop shop for us last week, but by going over 1.5 at Old Trafford. And then Kulusevski to have over 1.5 shots as well. That's one in his last 4 appearances, and somebody that seems to be thriving in that sort of attacking midfield position at the moment. He said he was born to play there, so he's just been wasted on the wing for the last couple of years. So Ruta, Johnson and Kulusevski all to have over 1.5 shots. I think it's around about a sort of 9-2 shot.
I would say it came in at 8-1 for Mark last week. Can Ruta, Johnson and Kulusevski deliver this time around? Mark's also got a prop shop selection for us as well. What we're looking at here, Mark?
Yes, I'm going to Leicester against Bournemouth and Tavernier to have a shot on target. I was actually surprised. He's had a shot on target in 7 of his last 8 matches. So looks to be a nice price to make that 8 in 9. I know Semenyo and Ivan Nilsson seem to be sort of getting more of the headlines at the moment, but Tavernier is playing his part in that Bournemouth attack as well. So, yeah, him to have a shot on target at the King Power.
Okay, and then we'll turn our attentions to the Assist Treble now, where Dan, myself and Mark select our picks follow this week as part of a Assist Treble. And Dan, we'll start off with your selection. Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the MK Dons tip against Tranmere, the home win. Tranmere's last 2 away games, they've lost 3-0 away to Gillingham and 3-0 away to Colchester. I actually think this is an even tougher game than either of those two. MK Dons 14th at the moment, but they'll be targeting the top 3. I think they'll win this game.
Mark, who's your selection?
So Jurgen Klopp would have moaned, wouldn't he, about the early kickoff for Liverpool. Hopefully Arne Slot doesn't go down that boring route as well. But what I like about Liverpool at the moment is they're defending well, they're keeping clean sheets or certainly limiting teams to few opportunities. And Arne Slot knows that he's got the quality in the final third to win games without kind of being overly aggressive. And so I don't think they look as flashy as they did under Jurgen Klopp, but they're getting the job done just as regularly and routinely. So yeah, Liverpool to beat an out of sorts Crystal Palace.
And I'm going to drop into the Championship, and I'm going to go with Coventry to beat Sheffield Wednesday at around about 10-11. I think Dan and Mark would both hold their hands up and say Spurs were very lucky to beat Coventry in the EFL Cup a couple of weeks ago, and they had a bit of a hangover off the back of that. They lost a couple of games, but they got back to winning ways with a 3-0 win over Blackburn. And they face a Sheffield Wednesday team who haven't won any of the last 4 away from home, 3 defeats and a draw for Wednesday. They're a much different proposition at Hillsborough than they are on the road. They've only scored 1 goal away from home during that 4-game run as well. So I think Coventry will come out on top here. So just to remind you, the Assist Treble this week, MK Dons, Liverpool and Coventry. And we'll conclude this week's show with the naps from Dan and Mark. Mark, we'll start off with your nap first.
Yeah, so somebody got in touch last week and said, how come the treble selections are different from the naps? And I mean, well, the answer I gave is that I think when we give the naps, they're kind of not always sort of the kind of bets you'd want to put in sort of multiple bets. So, for instance, my one here is a draw or double chance. So I'm going for Everton or draw double chance against Newcastle. Newcastle lost 11 times on the road last season. I don't think they've improved massively really this time around. They were thumped at Fulham, completely outplayed in the first half at least. Were lucky to get a point against Bournemouth, very controversial goal, and then nicked it against a Wolves team that is really struggling at the moment. I think Everton are on the up and can avoid defeat.
Dan, what's your selection for the nap?
Yep, going to go with Plymouth, draw no bet at home to Blackburn. I think odds against draw no bets are a really good price. They're a right handful, Plymouth, at the moment at home, beating Sunderland, as I mentioned, and blowing Luton away 3-1. Blackburn have been started the season well, but they were poor in that 3-0 loss away to Coventry. So Plymouth, draw no bet.
Okay, well, thanks to Mark and Dan for all their efforts again this week. Don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment if you want to ask Mark or Dan anything particular about how they look at their bets or select their bets for the weekend. Then feel free, of course, to drop us a message on the Racing Post YouTube channel. And if you like golf, of course, don't forget to not miss the sweet spot, I should say, with Steve Palmer every Tuesday. We'll be back, of course, after the international break, which takes place next week. Until then, enjoy your football and please remember to gamble responsibly.